We're continuing our discussion of negligence with a look at the proximate cause concept. So, proximate cause is all about what's reasonably foreseeable. What can we look at in the future and expect? What is it reasonable to assume might happen or who we might be responsible to? So we have several elements for negligence: duty, breach, causation, and damages. Duty is all about who is foreseeably at risk. We owe a duty of care to those who are foreseeably at risk. So I owe a duty of care to those I invite to my house. I owe a duty of care to the customers that come to our business, or the customers that purchase our products, because they're foreseeably at risk. I might owe a duty of care to my neighbors. This comes up again in proximate cause because we talk about, this duty is who is foreseeably at harm, and then we have to also prove that the cause was foreseeable. We're going to look at a case called Black versus William Insulation, where we have this proximate cause discussion. Who is foreseeably at risk of harm, and was it actually foreseeable that they would get hurt? So let's set the story here. We have a gentleman who works for William Insulation, and he's on the crew. They've got a plant that they're constructing. He's on this subcontractor, and this gentleman works for the subcontractor in this plant that they're constructing, and it's a long ways away from the office for this company, for this insulation company. And so it's a 90-mile drive, and what William Insulation does is that they provide a $30 per day additional check, so that people can use it, and the intention is a subsistence check, and so they can use it how they want. If they want to commute or stay close. The intention was for them to use it for lodging because of the distance, but what several of the employees decided to do was get together and carpool. And so they get together every morning. They work from 7:30 to 5:30, so 10-hour shifts with a half an hour lunch. So it's a 10-hour shift. So this group has to get on the road sometime probably around 5 or 5:30 a.m. to get there by 7 a.m. to get started at work. And so again, they get a $30 per day subsistence living check on top of their normal salary. So what this gentleman that causes the injury, he's driving the carpool truck. He falls asleep at the wheel. There's an accident, and the person who's injured sues. Now, another factor here is that the gentleman who was driving the carpool truck, was working a second job. He would get home after this job in the evening, and then he would go for another few hours and wash dishes until 11 p.m. The individual who's injured sues the insulation company and says that they are working their people too long, that they're not providing them housing nearby, or some kind of bus, because they knew or should have known that their employees would be tired, that they might nod off at the wheel, and that people might get injured. So the question is, are other people on the road at a foreseeable risk of harm that we should hold the insulation company responsible? So do you think that the insulation company knows that people might be injured? They're asking a lot for them to drive an hour and a half, at least an hour and a half to get to the site, and then drive an hour and a half back. Probably that's a lot. Probably people would get tired, and so you do need to provide something. And in this case, they provide $30 unstipulated. So presumably some people stay near the site in lodging on the location. Some people may come up with other means. What the court decides here is that $30 could have been used anyway. The individual driving the truck decided not to spend his $30 on local lodging and instead decided to drive. The insulation company shouldn't necessarily be responsible for its drivers past the time that they're paying for, past the hour. So you can imagine the problems this might happen. I mean, you don't know and you can't control what your employees do after hours. You can't control if they work all night and take 3 different jobs and maybe work the midnight to 8 cashier line at the Walmart checkout, right? As an employer, you should not be responsible to know and to follow what your employees are doing at all hours. You should not be forced to watch how they spend their money and whether they spend it on lodging and where they spend it on lodging, how close they are, or whether they're driving and how far away they're driving. This is just too difficult, too great of a burden for employers. So we simply say that the duty, the foreseeable duty, begins and ends during the scope of employment. So the resolution in this case is that William Insulation is off the hook. They provided something for the employee to use to purchase housing or get another method of transportation, and they do not have a responsibility to look further. Now, if we change the story a little bit and we say that they didn't provide that $30, I think there's a greater argument that there was a duty, because you should be providing, if you know that your employees have to travel so far, you should be providing something that can allow them reasonable accommodation. If you're giving them $5 a day, that might not be enough, but here it seems like the $30 presumably is enough to find some kind of accommodation, or that there were some options there. So no duty, we have a proximate cause issue. This is beyond the foreseeable scope of injury, and the case is dismissed, no negligence.